Hi, I'm Stephen Gaffney on 710 WOR for how to communicate and resolve issues with anyone, no matter how difficult they are, and how to make sure that that conversation is your best conversation.
Well, without further ado, my guest tonight, Stephen Gaffney, communications consultant for Fortune 500 companies. Stephen's the CEO of the Stephen Gaffney Company. He leads a team that creates consistently high-achieving organizations. He calls it KO, right? KO? I pronounced it right? Okay, consistently high-achieving organizations. And it includes developing high-achieving teams, honest communications, and changed leadership. Steve has been at this for over 3 decades and lists many Fortune 500 companies and the U.S. military among his prestigious set of clients. So we get feedback from people all the time, and I appreciate it. And I usually turn to the person that gives me feedback. I'm like, okay, tell me some subjects you want to talk about. Now, here's something that's like kind of delicate, but in the business world, whether it's a peer, whether it's a boss, whether it's an employee, whether it's a partner, whether it's a consultant, whatever the case may be, sometimes there's a scenario that you're dealing with a difficult individual. How do you navigate that? Do you just throw in the towel? Do you say, forget it, it just doesn't work? Or you turn to someone like Stephen Gaffney and say, Stephen, I got to figure this out. Stephen, welcome back to Mind Your Business.
Thanks for having me on. I love the introduction, too.
Thank you. You deserve it. So tonight we're going to go through, and this is something that you have kind of trademarked. I don't know if you officially trademarked it, but it's it's known as something that you just have tremendous expertise in, and that is honest and effective communication. And you have 9 proven strategies to deal with that subject of honest and effective communication. And tonight we want to look through the prism of dealing with difficult people, and of course with the positive outcome. This is not a race to the bottom, Stephen. When I hear to say difficult people, yeah, just take it out in the back alley. No. How do you go about it? I'm going to turn to you. If you want to start with deep listening, I turn to you, Stephen.
Well, we can go through the 9 strategies, which is basically a formula on how to resolve issues with anyone. And I developed this years ago and then taught it for many, many years. And then it's evolved into now working with teams. But when I was teaching it, it's a formula that always worked. I mean, people saved their marriage, they got promoted, they turned around cultures of organizations, but all by having difficult conversations and working with difficult people or challenging situations. And let me just say this right off the bat. One of the things that people don't think about is in any job, we get training, right? You get training on how to operate the computer, training on how to do certain process and procedures. There's training for all kinds of things. But rarely is there ever training on how do you have difficult conversations and get them resolved. There's negotiation, which is kind of a part of it, but really working with all kinds of people. So this formula, the 9 steps, will work with anybody in any situation. But before we get to that, I want to give the most important principle of all that overrides all these 9 strategies. Okay. And here it is. Getting the unsaid said. If people forget everything out of what we're about to do, the most important thing to remember is the biggest problem is not what people say, it's what they don't say to each other. So and you might say, but that's not true. I've said the unsaid said, spoken out, and people don't really like it. And I can give an example. Is it okay if I shoot right into an example? Sure. Where it still is getting the unsaid said. So I was doing a session for an organization, and this lady shared, sometimes you get the unsaid said and it doesn't go well. And I said, why don't you give me an example? So she said, I gave feedback to my peer that he's dropping the ball, he's basically messing up in the job, and he got upset. So this getting the unsaid said stuff sounds nice, but it doesn't always work. And I said to her, why did you say that? And she said, well, I care about what we're up to. I care about the customer. I care about the situation, and I care about him, and I want us all to work better together. And I said, did you say all of that? And of course she said, no. I said, I want to contend what tripped you up wasn't what you said. It's that you didn't say the rest of it. And so often in life, when people say they can't hear the difficult things, but are we saying the positive things? When they do things right, are we saying that? And are we sending the whole context around a conversation? So by far, the biggest problem in life is not what people say, it's what they don't say. So the trick is to get the unsaid said from us and from others.
What an incredible point. Right, because people would think that, like, I'm going to say what I need to say, and what is not going to be said is, I'm not saying it intentionally because it will create an argument. But you're saying, say it in a delicate way, say it in a, package it, positive way, but whatever it is, say it. Say it.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, though, a comical story. I had another person come up to me when I was about to do a session. She said, listen, it's great that you're doing this honest communication, resolving stuff. I speak my mind. People don't like it. And I said, well, what's going on? She says, I tell people when they're a jerk that they're a jerk. And I said, well, that's not honesty. That's brutality. We're teaching, again, honesty, not brutality. So name calling is not really honest. It is why we're saying that, and being fact-based and all the things we're about to cover, that's about honest conversation. So this isn't a matter of spinning it. It's about speaking the truth. And often when people are name-calling or being passive-aggressive and all these other behaviors, it's not really being upfront. What it is developing behaviors and doing other things that cover for us being really vulnerable about what the real issue is.
Tonight's show, a challenging one and a critical one, dealing with difficult people. And we have none other than Stephen Gaffney, an expert in this area, in areas of honest and forthright and effective communication for over 3 decades. Many Fortune 500 companies count him as their clients. By the way, before I get to the question, Stephen, how can people find out more information and to get in touch with you?
Great. Thank you for asking. JustBeHonest.com. So if they go to our website, JustBeHonest.com. That's JustBeHonest.com.
Straightforward. So before the break, we were talking about one aspect of dealing with difficult people, and even just a general great tip, and that is make sure that the unsaid is said. The unspoken is spoken. Okay, now we go and we dive right in. You have 9 strategies on how to deal. Of course, it has to do with honest and effective communication, but from the prism, from the lens, from the framework of how to deal with difficult people.
So I want to get to that strategy, but it's not like I'm trying to hold people's attention, but there's a very important point I want to make.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of stuff out there about difficult people, but let me just kind of reframe the whole situation.
Sure.
We're all difficult. I don't think there's ever been somebody who's never been called difficult in their life. The question is, what are we difficult in? And so I think there's a certain label that we put on people that's not fair, and we don't honor that we can be difficult. And we don't honor how we can make it difficult for other people, and then they become difficult. Let me give you an example. You ever have somebody in your life who says, look, I'm upset with you, and they start in, but they go, but it's no big deal. I'm going to deal with it. And you try to talk to them, but they won't talk to you about it. They won't carry the conversation through. It's kind of like they like to drop a grenade, and then they're like, hey, but just deal with it. Hey, but it's no big deal. And you're trying to work on it. So they're basically saying we're hard to deal with, but then they won't deal with it. So they become very difficult. It's so when there's a lot around getting the unsaid said, but we really got to look at ourselves. And it deals with the second principle about ownership attitude, which we'll get to. But let me just jump right in. The very first principle, which is really important on having a difficult conversation, is deep listening. In other words, listen and probe about what's going on. When we have a difficult time with somebody, we often want to go into transmit mode. But really what we want to do is go into listening mode. And even in listening mode, you can sometimes solve the entire problem. Let me give you an example. I was hired to work with this guy who had a really difficult customer. And he said, I really need to turn this around. So I said to him, here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask your customer on a scale from 1 to 10, how difficult are you all to deal with? So 10 would be you're great to deal with. 1 is you're, not
Impossible.
good to deal with.
Yeah.
Right. And then I want you, whatever the number that the customer gives you, I want you to then say, what would it take to make it a 10? So it's not like, what did we do wrong? Let's not go in the past, but what would it take to make it a 10? And I said to him, no matter what, I don't want you to respond. You can ask for clarification questions, but you're going to want to get defensive. And here's something interesting about when people give us feedback. There's assumptions to make. Everybody says don't assume, but there's certain assumptions that empower us in our life. And one assumption is to assume that whatever somebody's telling you is not initially the full truth. Whatever they're initially telling you is essentially not the full truth and not even the real issue. So what happens is when people give feedback, sometimes what first comes out is rough and raw, but it's not really the issue. And what happens is we get defensive and then we respond and the other person says, see, I can't give that person feedback. They just start debating and get defensive. But if we can actually just probe and let that initial feedback come to us like clouds passing by in the sky and let it go and just probe and probe, often you're going to find out the real issue was not what they initially said, but what they eventually said. So I said to this gentleman, listen, here's what I want you to do. I just get feedback, probe, get examples. But no matter what, even if the person calls you a Martian, no matter what, even if they say something factually incorrect, take notes. But whatever you do, probe, but don't respond. And then I want you to call me and we'll talk about how to strategize, how to resolve the issue. So he called me and he said, okay. I said, how'd it go? He said, it went great. I said, okay, that's fantastic. Let's talk about how to resolve it. He goes, I resolved it. I said, I told you not to respond. And he said, I didn't. What happened was I asked that question when I said, what would it take to make it a 10? She started to say, and I just listened and just probed. And after she vented for a while, she then turned and said, but I can understand why your company is doing this when I think about it. And I think one thing we could do better is this, this, and this. And I think if we do this, this, and that. And he said, so she outlined a whole game plan. And all I did was really probe and listen.
Wow.
And I've not heard that just one time helping people use that strategy. I've had it happen many times. It's amazing when we just really deeply listen and get where the person's at. Often the issue, the real issue comes up and we realize we can solve that, or it was a misunderstanding. And so very often you don't even need the rest of the strategies. We want to get to the rest of the strategies, but really deep listening. And deep listening, incidentally, means not only essentially the words, but really probing their wants, their desires, and really deeply listening. So beyond the words to the real issue and probe.
Wow. Love it. It brings to mind the famous, quote, we got 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them proportionally. All right. We go to number 2. You teased us about this before. Ownership attitude. What is that?
So absolutely. This goes back to like us honoring what we might be doing. And so our mindset dictates our behavior. So if we're always mad, what comes out of our mouth is going to be mad and showing anger. And have you ever had somebody who is quote unquote honest and they're always going to tell you what they think, but it's always something bad? And it's really what's going on in their mind. And often there might be blaming. The problem isn't really what they're saying. It's their mindset is always negative or blaming or angry. So it's really important for us to check our attitude before we share our perspective and take ownership. So let's talk about what ownership attitude means. It means we are 100% responsible for our attitude. Nobody can make us do anything. We allow it to be done. But this is not how we often communicate. For example, somebody might say, well, they made me say yes. I wanted to say no, but they made me say yes. Well, let's think about that for a moment. What do they creep inside our body, move our lips and make us say yes? The reality is they did what they did and we chose to say yes. So we have to honor that people do what they do and we choose things, right? And so it's not that we don't feel ever pressured, and I'm not trying to say that people are always off the hook, but we need to be responsible for our attitude. One of my mentors said to me, I love this quote, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is an inside job.
That's beautiful.
So we have to own our attitude. So nobody's ruining our day unless we allow them to ruin our day. And so that perspective is important because then when we get to how to say what we really need to say, we don't want to come from blame. We want to come from owning our attitude and our perspective.
Incredible. Happiness is an inside job. What a great line. What a great line. Mindset. Wow, we're speaking with Stephen Gaffney, and we're talking about, the title of the show is Dealing with Difficult People. But Stephen, in his great wisdom, he's really unpacked it, and he's like, hey, wait a second, we're all a little crazy and a little difficult. So we have to make sure to first check in with ourselves, and that's why number 1 and number 2 on the 9 strategies is deep listening. That's 1, and 2 is ownership attitude. We're going to take a short commercial break. Before I do, Stephen, how can people find out more information about the amazing array of services and the books that you've written?
If they go to justbehonest.com, that's justbehonest.com. And we just put up a team health calculator, and there's an honest communication health calculator that analyzes an issue. And so that's all free. They just go to our website, justbehonest.com.
So cool. Tonight's show, a little bit of a delicate one. Dealing with difficult people. As we know, this show is Mind Your Business, so in general, we're discussing it from the lens of the workplace. But as Stephen pointed out, it applies in any type of situation that someone may find themselves in. And Stephen has 9 proven strategies that help for honest and effective communication. And of course, it definitely applies to dealing with difficult people. In the previous segment, we discussed point 1. The first strategy was deep listening. Really listen. Listen. And he even shared a story, and he said he has many examples of this. And we know he's honest, right? What's his website? We go, justbehonest.com, right? So it was deep listening. And he even had examples about a vendor and a client where there was a little bit of a delicate situation, and the client obviously, the vendor wanted to hold on to the client, obviously, and had that delicate conversation. Steve coached the individual to just listen. He even said, "Don't respond," and sure enough, the client that was originally complaining solved the whole issue just by talking it out. The vendor didn't even respond. It was just the client talking and talking and talking. First complaining, and then okay, I guess the way it could work out. And the vendor just kept their mouth shut. Deep listening. Point number 2 was ownership attitude. Mindset. Again, what's that quote? Yeah, the great quote about
happiness is an inside job.
Happiness is an inside job. All right, so now we go to number 3 on your 9 proven strategies for honest and effective communication.
So if you think about it, the first 2 strategies are our kind of game plan going in. We want to probe and listen. And then when we're getting ready to share, our perspective is to own our attitude. So we're not blaming, because when we blame, people get defensive, even if we're making a good point, right? Tone is 5 times the impact of the words we say. In fact, I'll just tell a quick story, then we'll get to the rest of the strategies. I had this lady take a session of mine. She goes, "Are you going to talk about how to change your tone in here? Are you going to talk about that?" And I said, "Yes, what's going on?" She goes, "People say that I sound like I'm mad." And I said, "Well, are you mad?" She goes, "Oh yeah, I'm furious." Well, she sounded mad because she was mad, right? So, people are smart. We're lousy actors and actresses. They can tell, right? So there's a lot about owning our attitude, right? And so anyway, now we're getting into how to have the conversation. Right. So how to start the conversation is there's 2 really critical strategies. The first is purpose. Purpose is the reason why you want to talk to this person. The most important point in this is to begin with the goal, not the problem. Begin with the goal, not the problem. For example, if I were to say to you, "Listen, I want to talk to you about all the issues we're having." Nobody's ever excited to have that conversation. Can you imagine going home or getting to work and somebody goes, "Listen, we need to talk about some of the problems and issues"? Oh, sign me up to that conversation. But if we begin, which is actually more honest, and say, "Look, I want to talk to you about how we can work better together, how we can work faster together, how we can get this project done." Implied is there is problems, but we're letting the person know, "I'm not coming to you to complain. I'm coming to you because I want to resolve the issue." So begin with the goal, not the problem. The next strategy, so it works in conjunction. Purpose is to share concerns. Concerns are all the reasons why we don't want to have that conversation. For example, I'm concerned you might get upset. I'm concerned you might get defensive. I'm concerned, you might take it the wrong way. The irony is this: human beings love to prove people wrong. So if we say to somebody, "I'm concerned you're going to get defensive," people tend to go, "No, I'm not." And that actually works in your favor. Now, I've done this long enough where somebody goes, well, you don't know this person. I say, I'm concerned you're going to get defensive. They're going to get defensive. But it still works in your favor because let's say this. I want to talk to you and I'm concerned you're going to take it the wrong way. I'm concerned you might get defensive. What do you mean? And then you say, that's what I mean.
Sounds like
and
a
then
setup.
It's really important. But it's important to then quickly say the following. I am not blaming you, but I don't know how to talk to you. That's really important. I am not blaming you, but I don't know how to talk to you. So you're taking ownership, but you're honoring what's in the way is the difficulty of having the conversation. See, what I've found out over the years, people can resolve almost any issue as long as they feel comfortable to have the issue. It isn't really the issue that's the problem. It's the way we talk to each other that's the problem. Think about it this way. Your best friend, you can call up, be irritated, and they're going to take it generally the right way. You don't worry about it.
Right.
Then I'm sure there's other people you're like, they're going to get defensive. They're going to take it the wrong way. I'm going to say one thing and they're going to run in the wrong direction. So we're hesitant and we feel like we're walking on eggshells. Well, the key is I call those conversational landmines. And the way to avoid that is by sharing concerns, which we can talk about more. But real quickly, purpose and concerns work as a great combination on how to begin the conversation.
That was 3 and 4. Purpose is 3. The third strategy. The fourth is concerns. Number 5, and this is such a key, and it actually reminds, I guess it to a certain degree even touches on 2, which is ownership attitude, and that is notice versus imagine. Can you explain that and maybe even share a story or two to bring it out?
I can, but I want to say something real quickly about purpose and concerns it might be, okay, let's get to the next one, which I think is one of the foundational ones. But purpose and concerns are so important. Check this out. If I say to you, look, I want to talk to you about how we could work better together. And I'm a little bit concerned about bringing this up, that you might take it in a different way than I intended. I'm concerned that it might not be the right timing. What I'm doing in fairness to you, in fairness to the other person, is I'm letting them know quickly what the goal is and what I'm worried and I don't want to happen. So it's the guardrails of the conversation. This may even sound obvious, but think how often somebody will start a conversation by beginning with the problems, or it's even worse, they don't tell you what they're talking to you about. They just start rambling on about examples. They'll say, look, I'm upset because of blah, 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 blah. And you're thinking, where are you going with this conversation? You don't even understand it. But if they say purpose and concerns, you now get the context of the conversation very quickly, and it only took a couple minutes. So it's something that for people to really pay attention to, because I see this missed over and over again, and it's critical. How we set up a conversation has a lot to do with how the conversation goes.
Excellent. Now, number 5, notice versus imagine.
Okay. The reason why this is such a foundational principle, it's the distinction between what we notice versus what we imagine. In other words, the difference between fact versus our imagination. And I'm deeming imagination as our thoughts, opinions, and conclusions and evaluation. So in other words, if it isn't a fact, it goes in the other category. The best way to think about this is there's only 3 things you can ever notice about a human being: appearance, actions, and words. Think about it. We can notice what they say. We can notice how they're coming across, how they appear, and we can notice their actions. But that's pretty much it. There are other smaller ones, but those are only the major ones. Mm-hmm. And that's important because the thing is, can you notice somebody's passive aggressive? Can you notice somebody's difficult? Can you notice somebody's being inconsiderate? And the answer is no. Those are all opinions. For example, even in this whole way we're framing this up, it is conceivable that other people might not perceive that person as so difficult or so challenging. So we throw these labels around, and the problem is it's an opinion, it's a perspective. And even remember about opinions and perspectives. Psychiatrists and psychologists who are trained very well, they still will get it wrong. How in the world can we read a book, do something and label another human being. It's an oversimplification. So what's important in a difficult conversation is actually to look at what are the facts of the situation, to ground the conversation in the facts, and then own up our imagination. So it might be, look, I noticed the report came in at 5 o'clock rather than 3 o'clock. I noticed a few people told me you were upset. Now, incidentally, if a few people tell me that somebody's upset, it doesn't make it true that that other person is upset. The only thing that's a fact is people have told me this. History has been, unfortunately, been made by major mistakes when hearsay information ended up not being the truth. But it is true. You can say several people told me you were upset. And then you could say, look, I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about this. And this goes to the next strategy, number 6, ultimately, which is my request is tell me if you're upset. Tell me how we could work better together. And we can talk more about requests. But what's really important about this notice and imagine distinction is to ground the conversation in the facts. One other thing about this. I do a T-chart of notice and imagine where you put notice on one side and you put imagine on the other. And I ask people to look at an issue. And you know what's so shocking is when they look at the issue and they force themselves to write down what the facts are, I've had people get upset and actually even teary-eyed because what they've come away with and realized is they've been so upset with this person and they can't even remember what the facts are. They've been so spun up in their head about it. And they're hard pressed with even coming up with very many facts. And it forces us to ground our conversation in the facts. Just think about when we're talking to somebody and they're upset with us, we want to know an example.
Right.
It's like, and so we don't ground conversations in facts. And that's what that's all about.
So number 6 is, again, requests, meaning what are the specific actions that will need to be taken now that the information has been proven to be factual?
Absolutely. So, so here's the thing about requests. Go big and go strong. What I mean by that is ask for what you really want. Don't be a chicken about it. I love to tease people. I say, how many people have a hard time asking for things in life? And people raise their hand. I'll say, I've got a tip for you. Go hang out in an elementary school. Please call before you show up there. But inevitably, when we're around kids are request machines, and what's the worst that somebody could say to us when we're asking for something? The worst they could say is what?
No.
Yeah, the worst they could say is no. And what does no mean to a child? Ask again. Just think about it this way. As adults, we take our issues so seriously. But if you were at home and you were asking a child and you said, I asked my boss for something and my boss said no. And you said to your kid or child, what do you think? Your child would look at you strange and say, ask again. Welcome to my world. It's just people get so hung up and they said no, or they rejected me and said, well, ask again. Or now here's another strategy you could do as a great fallback question is what would have you reconsider and what would have you say yes? What would have you be more open to what I'm saying? What would I need to show you to ask you to reconsider this? Which incidentally is a great question to ask somebody who is really difficult and uncoachable is you might say, look, what would have you be open to what I'm saying? When they say it's got to be this way, you might say, what would I need to show you to change your mind? Now, if they say nothing, well, now you know it. But the point about the request is go strong, go bold, go big. The whole idea is ask for what you really want. And here's the other part, be specific. The problem is with a lot of difficult conversations, and I've helped people with thousands of them as they've transformed their life, is they don't really get specific. They'll say, so my request is we get along better or for us to communicate better. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't really move the needle. And the worst part about it is the other person listening to that imagines they come up with what that means, and then they go out and execute, and then that's not really what the other person wanted. Instead of saying, what do we really want? So here's an example. I had a lady go through a session of mine, and she was trying to work on her relationship with her husband, as an example, to give a personal one. And she said, I want more time with him. I want more, private time away from the kids. And so it was going to be a vague request. And then what she came up with is my request is we have dinner once a week away from the kids, and we get the babysitter accordingly. Now, I'm not saying that solves everything, and maybe we can make it even bolder and stronger and bigger. But what I loved about it is it's specific. Or you could say to your boss, my request is, can you tell me what needs to happen so I'll be the number one position to get that promotion? I know you can't guarantee that I would be promoted, but what do I need to specifically do to position myself so I'm the first in line to get that promotion, or I'm one of the most highly respected people in our organization, so I'm likely to get that promotion? You see what I'm saying is be specific, be bold, and be strong. So think big about that and be specific.
We're having an incredible conversation with Stephen Gaffney. He is one of the leading communications experts in the Fortune 500 space. He has many Fortune 500 companies and the U.S. military among his client list. Stephen, before we go to the break, how could people find out more information about the books you've written and the coaching and consulting that you offer to companies?
Thank you for asking. So justbehonest.com. And if they go to justbehonest.com, there's a place where we have a team health calculator, but we also have an honest communication calculator, honest communication calculator. It's the only one out there. And you can plug in your issue and out will come exactly what it's costing. So I've had people use that to persuade their boss and other people in their organization to actually resolve an issue, because it shows how something soft is really is connected to dollars and cents and time.
Fascinating. Mind Your Business with Yitzchok Saftlas right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, and around the world on the powerful iHeartRadio network. Tonight's show, what an interesting topic. What a delicate topic. Dealing with difficult people. Oh, man. And we know this is going to be a popular YouTube show. What could we do, because unfortunately, there are times that people run into difficult and challenging situations and they're scratching their head. What do I do? Is it impossible? Do I throw in the towel? And the answer is no. Certainly, if it's a major situation that your company has to deal with head on, you might even want to reach out to Stephen and consult with him. Again, you can reach him at justbehonest.com, and certainly watch this episode when it goes live on YouTube. You'll get a lot of great advice here. But of course, every situation is unique, and sometimes you might need a consultant like Stephen. And he was very gracious. He joined me here on the set. And he's talking tonight, he is sharing his 9 proven strategies to honest and effective communication. And we are talking about it from the lens of dealing with difficult people. Unfortunately, that sometimes needs to be tackled head on. In the previous couple of segments, we've gone through items and the strategies 1 through 6. We are now up to number 7, which I understand is benefits. Stephen, take it away.
I want to get to benefits, but a few things that's really important. What we're doing is, this is a formula. So I've had people, what they do is they plug in their issue and they go through this, and then that's the formula on how to have a conversation. I believe in life, if there's more formulas and processes, people will actually get things done. So it kind of goes back to the earlier point. If we were trained on exactly how to have these conversations and knew it would go well, we would have them. So they can use this formula over and over again in their business and also personal life. Something else I want to cover. You mentioned the word impossible, and it triggered a story that I wanted to share with folks. I had a gentleman in a session of mine. He said, do you think all relationships can be fixed? Everything can be resolved? And I said to him, yes, I do. I do believe that. And he said, well, I don't. And I said, well, how's that working for you? See, and then I went on to say, look, I don't really know if it can, but I believe it can. And if I believe it, I'm more likely to go after it and achieve it. Belief drives actions. Actions don't drive beliefs. So people who say, I'll believe it when I see it, the problem is you got to believe it before you can actually see it for the most part. And so if we believe all relationships and issues can be resolved, and I do believe that, we're more likely to resolve it. And so often somebody will say, don't you think there's some issues that are impossible to solve? And I'll say, no, I actually believe all relationships can be resolved. And people say, well, how much time should I give it? And I say, well, that's a very personal call, but never ever say, and I rarely like to use absolutes, but never say, I've tried everything. Whenever we say in life, I've tried everything, we're basically saying with about 8 billion people who live on this planet, am I so arrogant and egotistical to believe that nobody has ever encountered this challenge with a person like this and resolved it? Odds are, with 8 billion people out there, we've got Google and ChatGPT and all the other things that odds are out there, somebody has resolved an issue. Somebody has created an interview, right? What we're doing.
That's right.
A book, a video. There's all kinds of stuff out there. So any relationship issue can be resolved. You've got to believe it. And if you believe it, you're more likely to go after it.
Incredible. So number 7.
Yes.
Benefits. Yeah.
So when we're working through and having a difficult conversation, right? We've talked about setting it up and then having the conversation, making the request. Now we need to think what's in it for the other person. So often people make requests by what's in it for us. And we forget to say what's in it for them. Just this morning, I was coaching a client of mine who's working through a very difficult situation with a peer of his. And he said, look, I need to get this person on board. And so this is what we need. And I said to him, so what's in it for him? What's in it for the other person to agree to it? And if you're not sure, it might be a good thing to even ask. You could say, look, here's my request. Here's what I want. How would this be beneficial to you? And sometimes a person might say, I don't really see the benefit to me. In which case you want to, lay out that case. So often I see people ask their boss for things and they forget to come at it. What's in it for their boss? What's in it for the organization? Or I see executives make an argument of why it's great for the company, but they don't make an argument of why it's so great for the employees. My point in bringing this up is one of the things that I see missing with many, many models is they forget in difficult conversations to come at it for what's in it for the other person and start to think about this. Well, there are 8 drivers of human behavior, and not to just do a quick tease and not to deliver. They can contact us and we can send them something. But real quickly, some of the drivers of human behavior are around, first, about love, what people love to do and connecting it with their passion. Another big driver is security. People are driven by security. They're also driven by their image, their ego. They're driven by goals, achievement, making a difference. And so enjoyment. There are many drivers, but even if you're like, okay, was that 7 or 8? I don't know. I even said them pretty fast. But the point is, no matter what, just think what would be in it for them. And maybe it's as simple as this. Look, I want us to work better together because I notice the tension. And I don't like the tension, and I have to imagine you don't like the tension either. I have to imagine you don't like these kind of conversations either. So let's try to work together so we're not having these tense conversations moving forward. Let's figure out a way how we can all work better together and everyone benefits. Even that would be better than just making a request and saying what's in it for us. Think about what's in it for them.
Incredible. Such great advice. I mean, in every area of life. In every area of life, just what's in it for the other party. What it's all about the other person, because then it's win-win. Everyone wins.
Absolutely.
Number 8, follow-up. Meaning, is that about accountability, basically?
Well, it's about accountability, but it's also about knowing about how people think about things. So, I've been at this for almost 30 years. And what I've discovered is when people have difficult conversations and when it goes well, what happens is no matter how well it goes, a person dissects the conversation afterwards. They think, oh, that was really great. And then they might talk to people or whatever, and they start to evaluate it. And they'll say, they said this, and I wonder now what they meant by that. And we didn't bring up this, and I forgot to bring up this. So a good rule of thumb is always follow up a difficult conversation within 24 to 48 hours. Don't let it go longer than that. Because what happens is people will dissect it. And an example is, have you ever had a conversation with somebody and you resolved it and you feel really good? And then you may not see the person for a while and you see them a couple weeks later, but it seems kind of tense, awkward. And you're like, wow, we left it in such a great place. But what happened is the person kind of dissected it and then they feel awkward because they're like, I didn't bring this up in the conversation, but we ended well. So I don't know. And they bury the issues. And here we begin the cycle again. The best way is to follow up and say, listen, we had a great conversation the other day. Just wanted to check in. How you doing? So you want to build from the conversation. These aren't just one-off conversations. This is everyday conversations. One of my beefs about the idea of crucial conversations, and the content is great, but what I don't like about that aspect is it misses the point. We don't want to have crucial conversations. We want to have everyday conversations. And this is about how to have everyday conversations so we don't have to have the big one. Yes, this method works when we have to have the big one, but these methods work day in and day out in having great relationships with anyone. So always follow up.
Wow. We are, the time flies. We have actually only around 3 minutes left to the show. And I know number 9 is one of your favorites from being a friend of yours for many years. Again, when I read your original book that I picked up in an airport somewhere, number 9, thank you, appreciation.
Absolutely. So number 9 is when you're wrapping up the conversation, no matter where you're at, is appreciate. People don't always remember how you begin a conversation, but they will never forget how you left them in a conversation. So sometimes you have a difficult conversation, and let's go worst case thinking now. Yeah. And chances are, and again, you use this method, it will work. But let's say something didn't get completely resolved, and you had a great conversation and it didn't get completely resolved, or facets got resolved, or whatever. What you could say is, listen, I just want to acknowledge that I really appreciate you shared your perspective with me. It's really helped in growing, and I feel like we're on a great pathway forward. Or what you could say if the issue got completely resolved is, really, I appreciate you spending the time with me. It actually now, I feel good about this. I hope you do too. And what I specifically appreciate is how you shared with me exactly what's going on. And we both came at it from not blaming. We really looked at how to grow. And I feel really inspired to work with you. I feel really inspired to build our relationship, or whatever would be appropriate to say. But just remember, so much is spent on how to begin in life. You only make a first impression once. Right. And I think that's way too much pressure. The thing is to remember the conclusion. People will never forget how you left them in a conversation. That's really important. So always end on some form of a sincere, authentic appreciation.
And what's really special about how you pointed that out is that even if it's the conversation, let's say someone had only an hour to discuss it and not everything was resolved. There's still some open issues, and it's even ending a little bit. There's some tension there. Still, say, okay, listen, we know we both have to go now. We're going to re-pick this up, but I can't thank you enough because we started the conversation, we approached it, we put things on the table, etc. Not just, all right, it went south, so all right, get lost,
Well, and something else too. See, if we end on an appreciation, it inspires the person to have another conversation. See, if we have a difficult conversation and it ends on a bad note, and it won't if you follow this formula, then the person is more likely to have, if it ends on a bad note, because they didn't follow the formula, they're not going to want to have another conversation. But when people resolve issues, we're willing to have another conversation. What strikes me is people are not afraid of having conversations. They're afraid of having unresolved conversations. That's really important because people are not really afraid of conflict. They're afraid of unresolved conflict. We will have conflict debate with people that we feel like it's going to work out, but we will avoid it if we feel like it won't work out. So what's really important is the resolution part, the end part. The appreciation is critical to the success and setting the groundwork to future conversations.
What an incredible show. Stephen shared the 9 key strategies for honest and effective communication in tonight's show, dealing with difficult people. Before I let you go, Steve, how could people find out more information about your books, your speaking engagements, etc.?
If they go to justbehonest.com, and in fact, I have a new book coming out soon, but if they go to justbehonest.com, and there's an honesty calculator on our website where you can literally go to our website, it's free, and you plug in the issue and out will come how much it's costing you in dollars and the organization and in time. And then you can use that as leverage to encourage the organization to bring up these issues.
How incredible. How incredible. Well, this wraps up an incredible edition of Mind Your Business. Again, tonight's show, titled Dealing with Difficult People, and there's going to be many business class clips which are churned out from this incredible interview. If you're on WhatsApp, you want to receive the free daily WhatsApp broadcast, just text 2 words, sign up to 718-594-6519. Text sign up to 718-594-6519, or on Instagram, just follow us at Business Class Clips. Well, this wraps up an incredible edition of Mind Your Business. Tune in again next Sunday night for another great edition of Mind Your Business right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. Have a successful week. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to this channel and be notified every single time a new video goes live. Don't miss out on any of the weekly interviews that I have with top business leaders, sometimes Fortune 500 executives. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications.